Well, I'm Jules Unn. Please, big round of applause for Bridge again. Yeah, do you reckon you might be able to turn that projector off? That'd be better. Awesome. That was amazing. I don't know how you did that, but give this bloke a raise. No, this is my moment. You're not going anywhere. No, it's about me. No, actually, I'm no expert on this topic, so I'll be delegating a lot. I'm just asking questions, because if I had to answer them, I'll be stuffed. Did you want to grab a drink or anything, or go to the toilet? It's not as hot sitting down, just for the record. It's just because you had all the eyes on you, because now I'm heating up, and I wasn't a second ago. So you're good, you're good. All right, well, thank you for that, and also thank you for coming along tonight, and thanks for the team for organising it as well. You've done a very good job. Pretty exciting to see how this workforce is starting to shift and change, how it impacts businesses leveraging talent. I know one of those stats that you were saying in there that by 2020, 40% of the US workforce will be freelancing, which is incredible. And I read a stat the other day from Upwork, which is 47% of millennials are already freelancing. How many of you think that your businesses are already sort of prepared for that new way of working? Be honest. A couple of you? A few of you? Bull crap. This tall bloke is the CEO of my company, Tribe, and he's just trying to big note himself then. Yeah, there's a VC next to him, exactly. You put him up to him. He was trying to suck up to Paul and get some coin, which Paul's not given us yet, after 2 years of asking. I've run into him at Marcus's, yeah, unlocked, hasn't got any money out of Paul. Yeah, well, we'll wear a wig. But anyway, Anthony, how do you feel that Tribe, our business, so to give you a bit of background, I've lived the freelance lifestyle. I sort of studied graphic design, and then I was sort of a life coach for a while, and then I was a TV presenter for 10 years, and then they stopped giving me jobs, and then I was a radio presenter for 5 years, and I thought, no, I'm going to start my own thing, because then I can't fire myself. And then I hired someone who could fire me. But Anthony, we sort of built Tribe a couple of years ago alongside Matt Berryman, of course. But how would you say, we've got 40-odd staff around the globe. They're not freelancers. What, in that sometimes they don't turn up? Yeah, nice. Yeah, millennials, yeah. It was amazing, that day between the weekend and Cup Day. Incredible. That was so sick. Yeah, and hoax, it's amazing. Anyway, I think we can all do a little bit better. I mean, that scares the hell out of me. 2 years and there's going to be that really big shift. I don't think the workforce is prepared for that in any way, shape or form. And I actually understand that space, but also there's a bit of, I would say there's a lot of pressure on going, how do we evolve? How do we understand it? And I think there's no better way to, I suppose, pick that apart than speaking to people on the front line of that, who are sort of a part of their transformative process within their own businesses. So we'll be able to sort of get a bit of the insights from these guys. So without banging on too much about Tribe, although it is tribegroup.co, we're going to start on my left. So Graeme Crozier, do you want to jump up here, Graeme? Is that how you pronounce your name? Yep. Great, I knew that. Graeme is a senior strategy expert at Telstra, currently serving there as general manager of market strategy. So Graeme has a background in consulting, having worked in both a big firm, Bain, as well as consulting independently. So he has first-hand insights into how consulting is changing from both a business perspective as well as a consultant's perspective. And I know that, of course, because it's written in front of me. And also Graeme, as far as I'm aware, and because that says that as well, because I'm not aware, the person who wrote that is, the only person on the panel to have worked in independent consulting and at a tier 1 consultancy. So we'll dive into that a bit more detail soon. Anna, would you like to take the stage, please? Yeah, spread them out. Do you reckon turning to the person next to you might be a bit awkward? What have you heard about Graeme that I haven't? Because I'm pretty close to Graeme, and I'm starting to worry. What does it say about him? So Anna comes to us with over a decade of experience at ANZ Bank. Currently, she's heading up ANZ's much publicised Agile Transformation Program. So we'll ask Anna a bit more about some of the challenges you're facing there. And also Jeff Darlington. Jeff, grab a seat, my friend. God, Anna didn't get that. But then again, she was trying to separate from us. So Jeff's a senior strategy executive at Australia Post and has a unique background, having worked for nearly a decade in startups before moving to Bain and eventually his current role at AusPost. Experience spanning from small businesses and startups to one of Australia's largest businesses. It's going to be incredibly insightful throughout the night, I'm sure. So like Graeme, Jeff will be able to provide an interesting perspective on how consulting and contingent work is changing. Briefly, what has been one of the sort of challenges that you've faced over the last couple of years, whether you personally or within the business, that that you've been able to overcome using sort of these agile techniques?
So, at Australia Post, we're, as you might imagine, facing a bit of a transformation challenge.
Yep.
We're taking a 200-year-old organization, trying to compete in marketplaces, environments against very agile businesses. So we need to do different things, but we also need to do them very differently. As part of the strategy work we did a couple of years ago, we identified a couple of key markets for us, but equally important was the cultural change that had to go about as well in order us to get products that customers love to market faster than the competition, because that's the only way to win. And in order to do that, we had to completely think about how we staff projects, about how we think about talent, about the kind of talent that we bring in. As Bridget was saying earlier, I think the external forces that are causing businesses to need to move faster are creating the need to change all of the structures in place that serve a mature business very well, but that don't serve an innovating business very well. So, over the past couple of years, my role has shifted from kind of a strategy role to an innovation role to a commercialization role to now a kind of scaling an operational role. And I think that's representative of the pace of change that the organization has gone through. And over that time, I've needed very different skill sets to come in and help me out, build out the capabilities of the team that I had with me on a full-time basis for very short-term needs. So in that, we've had consultants come in from Expert360 to do strategy work for us, to do customer work for us, to do analysis for us, to do innovation for us. And I think, without those skill sets at that time, we wouldn't be where we are today. And I think that's, for Australia Post in particular, but I think more broadly for many Australian corporates, if they don't adopt that mindset of getting the people that they need with not just the skill set that they need, but also the cultural fit that they need. And this is another wonderful thing about Expert360. You could kind of test people out and find out who works for you and who doesn't.
It's like the Big Brother house, then you just evict them, yeah? Perfect.
Well, if it's not working for both parties, then it's not a transaction you want to engage in the long term, right?
Yeah, just the candle gets put out.
And you get both parties get the optionality, which is valuable to both. So so that's something that that we've found a lot of benefit in, and that has allowed us to, as I said, get to where we are today.
Yeah, great. Over to you, Anna. So I'm interested in the transformation process and how that impacts on people and culture as well.
Yes.
How you take them along for the journey.
Yes, and that's really been the biggest challenge.
Feel free to use it. I mean, you don't just have to hold it.
So that really that really has been the biggest challenge for ANZ. As you can imagine, we are a company that employs 50,000 people globally. It's a company with a proud history, 120 years of delivering extraordinary results, and with it a mindset and culture of why do we need to change, right? What's if it's not broken, why try to fix it? And in a typical Australian culture, it's all good until it's no longer good anymore. And I remember about 8 years ago now, our former CEO, Mike Smith, I was at a function with him and I asked him a question. And the answer to that question ended up being splattered all over the newspapers that week. And it's a funny anecdote, but I think it speaks really well to the cultural mindset of big companies in Australia. I asked him about how we're going to, it was the start of his tenure at ANZ, and I asked him, how are we going to differentiate ourselves from the other three big banks? And he used the analogy of three quality, big pedigree cows that are all living in this wonderful couch grass paddock, and one moves a little bit to the left to start eating the new grass, and the other three move next to it, and they just continue to kind of hum. And he actually basically, with that answer, I thought we actually don't have a differentiation strategy. So
was that his answer?
Yes, that was his answer. It was all over the newspapers.
So whatever they do, we're going to do. And how good and plentiful is this?
Well, and granted, he was constrained. There's the constraints around 4 pillars policy, the regulator, etc. So it was.
Yeah, but it's a shit analogy. I mean, never mind regulation. It still doesn't even really make sense to me. I'm going to Google it.
That was 8 years ago. All right, now. Things have changed significantly since then.
Yeah,
right?
cows got skinnier.
Correct. Cows got a lot skinnier. Paddocks increasing. And all of a sudden, you've got the idea of all of these fintechs entering the market, where they're offering, for example, a mortgage solution in 24 hours, whereas the standard banks takes up to 4 weeks to assess and give you an answer to a mortgage application, for example. We still use archaic identification methods, and I could go into a whole lot of our processes, but this idea around Amazon, for example, financial services, it is making the boards of banks very, very anxious. Luckily enough, Shane Elliott, our CEO, is a very, very brave man indeed. So he went and had a look at what ING had done in the Netherlands. So ING 2 years ago had gone through this enormous transformation where they've implemented agile practices across the entire enterprise. So Shane came back and said, well, actually, we need to do this because to give you an example, when it comes to talent, in Benelux countries today, 2 years after their implementation, the employer of choice for software engineers is ING Bank. Google is coming at a second place. So he came back and had a chat to our board members and said, this is something we have to do in order to differentiate, but also in order to survive. The journey this year, and I've been leading the change management and transformation delivery part of this program. It has been really difficult. We generally find that people understand the impetus for change and they're ready to change. They are willing to change to an extent, but they do not feel that they're able to change. And that is where you really need to invest an enormous amount of resources into lifting the capability, into training, into changing the mindset, into investing into those really important soft skills. I mean, even things such as, how do you self-organize? How do you work in multidisciplinary self-managing teams? Those are, and the challenges are multiple.
Perfect. Well said. What about you, Graeme? What are you sort of implementing in terms of overcoming these things? That's enough. Thanks. Over to Matt.
Just getting picked on because I'm the only Kiwi on the panel. But,
oh, okay. We've got the subtitles underneath. Anyway, once the camera's up.
But look, we're a bit like Post. We're an old company. We've got 30,000 people. We've been around for hundreds of years. And we're in a just incredibly fast changing industry right now, and we need to change incredibly fast, and we aren't really set up to do it in terms of our people and culture. So for context, so I've been at Telstra for 2.25 years, and my roles evolved 4 times quite significantly over that time. So I'm sitting on roles that are about 6 months in duration. And in each of those roles I've come into, I've had to start with almost no team and rapidly build and scale a team. And the first 3 times I did that, I did it the traditional way through trying to recruit people for permanent roles through traditional recruiters. And by the time that we had, we were really at scale in terms of our team, we were sort of 3 or 4 months through what ended up being, a 6-month piece of work that we were doing. So this time around, and when I took a new role in beginning of August, we worked with Bridget and the team to overcome some pretty big obstacles in Telstra to do things differently in terms of people, and we managed to eventually be able to use the Expert360 team. And it went for me from having to wait sort of about 12 weeks from the time that you start to look for someone to come into your team to when they actually land and are up to speed. The first time we posted an ad on Expert360, we had, within 3 days, we had 14 applicants to our ad. We interviewed 2 days after that, and we found 2 very good people. There were 6 people that I think would have been able to do the job. The calibre was incredibly high. 2 people that we chose were able to start 4 days later. So we took our cycle time from when we instigated to when we had someone on board down from about 12 weeks to 8 days. And it's just enabled us to achieve an enormous amount.
And so, reading between the lines, you had a bit of resistance by the sound of it to be able to implement those processes. What are you faced with in there? And I'd be interested to follow up with you, Maddie, as someone who can make decisions quickly, and sometimes good ones. But what are you faced with when you say, hey, we've got to shift and we've got to transform here and we've got to be ahead of the curve? What do you get?
So we have policies and we have procedures, and
yeah, you should follow them.
And all the people in the audience who work in big corporates are laughing because it's the same at a lot of big corporates, I think. So there's just a way of doing things. It was fascinating to me, really. The model that we had was very much you either employ someone permanently or you bring people in through a statement of works, a big consulting firm, something like that. The idea that you would just find some talent, bring someone in, get them started, it was just foreign. So, some of Bridget's team and I worked really, really extensively with our procurement teams. The guys were fantastic at building workarounds in order to make it work. And we got there, and we've got this kind of patched together sort of process that just sort of evades the real processing obstacles. And it just
someone at the back.
And it just
get him out, security.
Yeah, no, he's going to help me. And it just makes it work. So we've patched it together. We'll make it better going forward. But it's the impact that it's had on me as a client of procurement has been absolutely phenomenal. It's just enabled me to get my job done, essentially.
Right. Over to Anna. So Anna, as Bridge covered, analysts are forecasting that 40% of an enterprise organisation will soon be classified as external workforce. How are you sort of managing that shift in your organisation?
We are at the start of that journey. Traditionally, ANZ has always, ANZ and other banks have always used consultants, SOWs, contractors, in order to create a bit more of a dynamic workforce. I don't think that this is going to be, in the end, a choice by us. I actually think the external environment is going to impose it upon us.
What does that look like? Like when you're starting to feel that?
Yeah, so we're still not feeling it. I think, as I said to you, we are at the start of the journey, and now we recognise that one of the key results of this transformation has to be our capability to deliver much, much faster outcomes to our customers. So when Amazon is delivering code every 11.7 seconds, the days are gone when ANZ can go and fund a project for 18 months to deliver a piece of software on legacy infrastructure. So, but in order to be able to do that, you need talent and people that are able to actually deliver that and think outside the square and have those technical skill sets. And as I said, companies like ANZ do not necessarily tend to attract the best of software engineering or best of human-centered design or best of customer journey type expertise. And that is where I think there is a real opportunity for a place like Expert360 to come in and offer a value proposition.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Perfect. So Graeme and Jeff, we'll go on a bit of a different sort of spin on the question for you two. So Graeme, as discussed earlier, you come from a unique position. Tier 1 consulting firm, independent consultant, then having hired consultants for a large corporation. How do you think companies' use of consulting firms is changing and will continue to change in the coming years?
Look, I was an independent consultant before there was anything like Expert360, and it was really hard back then. Like you did everything through your network. You got all your work through people you knew and things like that. And as a result, it wasn't the big marketplace that it is now. So there were really two ways of doing strategy back when I was at Bain. It was you either did it in-house through a central team, or you did it with lots of consulting firm teams. And when I was at Bain, there were just dozens of Bain teams all over Telstra on, doing projects and things like that. Nowadays, we wouldn't do that. We would use big consulting firms very selectively on really big enterprise-wide programs. But for the sort of stuff that you do in a business unit or for a particular type of work, you don't need that immense amount of firepower. A lot of the problems that we need to solve aren't really rocket science. They're sort of, basic structured thinking, get some good insights, get some change happening, and we don't need that firepower. So the use of consulting firms, the traditional consulting firms, is far less today than it was when I was at Bain, 10 years ago. We do a lot more in-house, and in-house, for me at least, is increasingly meaning a mixture of sort of permanent employees and contractors that we can bring in.
Perfect. Yeah. And Jeff, you worked at Bain before moving to AusPost, so you have some insights here?
Sure. So I'd echo what Graeme said about how you often don't need the big bang. A lot of the things that we're doing AusPost require, a small team, short stint, and most consulting firms just aren't set up to do that. And certainly the procurement processes that most corporates have put in place are not set up to do that, right? Just a quick, short piece of work that could add a huge amount of value. Most of them are set up to manage, the really big pieces that require a lot of governance and policy. So that is one thing that I think is changing a lot, certainly at AusPost. The other thing, just reflecting back on my consulting days, and I'm going to kind of tell a consulting truth here that I'm sure many already know. When you come in as a consultant in a big
Matt,
firm...
did you say you're going to charge us?
I said overcharge.
Overcharge. Sometimes. It depends what we deliver. Yeah. But you come in, and actually the problem that the client thinks you're there to solve is not the problem that they have to solve. And it's very difficult to pivot. So I feel like,
Is that for extended engagement?
Well, that's how you do it, right? Yeah, which isn't really great for anybody. The right answer would be to sit down and go, actually, you've got a slightly different problem here. And the group of people that you need to solve this problem doesn't look like the team I just sold you. It actually looks more like this. And to get that kind of agility, you need a different model, because the consulting firms are set up to sell the big projects, and they're still valuable. But I think we're seeing a lot more value in the small, short, more agile pieces of work.
Yeah, perfect. We're going to throw over to you guys to ask some questions too, so make use of the opportunity. But did you want to add to that, attracting talent, how you guys go about doing that, etc.? I mean, obviously they've handed it all the way down to you, so they've got nothing to say, and you don't have a choice but to answer. So you better have something really inspiring.
Well, it's our biggest.
You're going to have to dig a little deeper, Graeme, just a little bit. The hesitance in your voice. I mean, we're busy people. We're not sitting through that shit. If you're not inspired, save it. Only joking. I'm only teasing.
So
Anna's taken it off you anyway. At least I was joking. Anna genuinely thinks you had nothing to say. Uh-oh.
So at ANZ, the way that we are looking at it is that, in my personal experience over the last 10 years, what the shift that I have absolutely noticed is that people really want to feels a sense of congruence with the company's purpose. So when you think about, all those motherhood statements around accountability, responsibility, respect, that you see on the lanyards of big companies, Enron had them all, and we all know how that ended. People really now want to feel a real connection towards what is it that the company is doing. So something that's been really, really important for us through this transformative journey at ANZ is about how do we ensure that what we want to do as a bank, which is actually truly empowering our communities to thrive, but what does that actually mean at a low level? If you're going off and closing a branch where a community really needs it, but on the other hand you're saying you're enabling communities to thrive, it's not congruent. Yeah. So our work really has been about how do we ensure that really resonates with people across the organisation.
Great. Do you guys want to add to that?
Look, we find it easy to get on the consideration list because of the brand of the company and because what we are. But what we need to do and what we're very focused on doing is creating opportunities that are exciting. So no one wants to come in nowadays and do a sort of a routine, a sort of processy type job. So we need to create really tough challenges for people, and that's sort of the large focus of what we do in my space anyway, is create something that someone wants to come in and solve. And in a culture that's very good for a big corporate. We were talking about it earlier tonight. Telstra has a very high flexibility culture. I have team members in 5 different cities. You can work anywhere when you work with us. We have a policy which we call all roles flex, and what that means is you do the work at the time that it suits you to do it. You find your hours that work for you and you get the results done. So culture's really big, creating really
it's
good
a huge shift.
Really
you wouldn't have expected that years ago, would you? It's already moving fast.
Yeah, and it's what brings people to Telstra, and it's what keeps people at Telstra too. So yeah.
Well said. Who'd like to ask a question?
So we're moving to more flexible workforce, and often it's the onboarding. It's kind of takes 3 months for people to get their head around the business and to get the runs on the board, and then obviously when they leave they take a lot of knowledge with them. So how's your businesses changing to make that onboarding process easier for a flexible workforce so it doesn't take as long, and also when someone does move on, how do you make sure you don't have that sort of brain drain of intellectual knowledge about the business?
That is an excellent question.
So we haven't got it right as an organisation. We do it in pockets. So the example I gave before about how we had to really come up with an onboarding process that we pasted together with sort of bits of tape to just make it work is the reason we had to do that is because we don't have a smooth, streamlined onboarding process, and we don't have consistently uniform processes for knowledge management either, and which is the other part of your question. So what it relies on really is, rather than a sort of top-down mandate of this is how you do it, it requires sort of dynamic, people-focused leaders who will drive change from the bottom up, and that's the only way that you can really make things like that work. It doesn't work to have a whole big enterprise-wide onboarding process to change an organisation, because stuff just doesn't happen. So what we focus on is a culture of leadership where every leader is driving towards the same outcomes, which include making it very easy for our people to work in the company, making it easy for them to come in, and making sure that teams continue and we don't have sort of single points of failure and things like that. So we do it by empowering leadership and by building leadership into all levels of the organisation, which is a bit different perhaps from the sort of answer that you're expecting. But in a company of 30,000 people that's sort of spread all around the world, it just doesn't work to have rigid top-down processes for stuff. Yeah.
I'd be interested to get your perspective of that, Bridge, because obviously you'd face that question a lot. I mean, as you're sort of pioneering and showing a new world of how they do it, a lot of people would say the onboarding is tricky, and then just as soon as we do, they nick off.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's a really good question, actually, and I'll break it into 2 parts. 1, the onboarding. 2, the offboarding IP leakage. On the onboarding, we've sort of taken, as we've approached the challenges that organisations are having with moving their workforce into more agile, we've sort of picked a problem and worked on it for 6 or 7 months. that first one was actually just getting talent. How do you find? Connect. Number one, connect. And now we're sort of moving much more into the internal marketplace, but also just freelancer or contingent management. And onboarding is something that we're working on.
Yeah.
And there's a few different facets to it. One is, are they onboarded? Are they alumni? Have they worked here before? And not just like, have they done the documentations? Are they culturally onboarded? Do they know the lingo? Do they? So being able to see on Expert360, I think, have they worked here before, and can I filter that? Have they, ANZ, for example, have an onboarding thing, a compliance thing, which lasts 12 months. So who here is running out? So those kind of features are in the roadmap for broad product, but part of our custom solution. Now the offboarding piece is tricky. It's hard.
Well, it's not more about IP leakage. That's not sort of what you mean. It's more about the investment. Like if they're coming for a short time and the whole workforce is starting to be short-termism, is there a point where everyone goes, oh, that's not me, but I won't be here by the time that happens, and they're all just, skimming across the surface rather than becoming entrenched like your mate who's already left. He's gone back to work, who's been in the same job for 20 years.
Sorry, Jules, can you reframe the question? Is it about keeping track of people once they're in there? Or is it...
No, it's more about their dedication, their...
Oh, like how... Yeah.
Yeah.
Understood. So I think...
Yeah, better level. I mean, if it was a competition and you had to vote for someone, do you think mine's a better level or is it a bit lower? Anyway, you go.
I'm a consultant, so I'm obsessed with framing the problem properly.
Better. So.
Yeah. 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 Yes. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Yes. Yes. Good question. So the first piece is actually the root cause of some of like one of the, maybe not root cause, but one of the outcomes is that people, a lot of the consultants or contractors in organization, they might be rolling off that project, but they are a gun for another one. So and the way that happens currently in organizations is water cooler chats. It's actually not water, there are no such thing as water coolers anymore, but corridor conversations, and they're out there and they're it's like, oh, Jeff, you've got, I'm rolling off next week. He's like, oh, well, actually we're spinning up this project. Oh my God, you'd be perfect. And so we start to see this happening on the Expert360 platform. We talk to the consultants. So part of it was about just visibility, like who's rolling off, and allowing other hiring managers so that we can actually, for people who've built up that cultural and IP knowledge and been part of creating it, how do we keep them here? How do we allow them to get all the good stuff out of here, maintain the flexibility, diversity, but allow the organization to be the first right of refusal on what they do next. And so, that's on the platform, being able to see what else is happening at Ozpost, and how do I put myself forward for that. So that's sort of the first piece, which is just visibility and keeping people in the building. And then I think the second is just, organizations think a lot about their employee value proposition. How do they think about their contingent value proposition? We call it their CVP. When a consultant or a contractor rolls off a project on Expert360, we ask them to rate the client. We ask them about scope adherence, clarity of instruction, culture, management style, and we haven't started feeding that back to our clients yet, but we will, so that they can become better managers in this sort of new world of work. I'm sure there's much more we can do, but that's sort of the two things. Yeah.
Perfect. Well said. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Thank our panelists, of course. Big round of applause for the team. Thank Bridget. Also Lisa, Sally, and Julia, and we've got the rest of the night, so feel free to network. No doubt you'll be able to all have a chat to John. He would love to have a chat with you. Have a drink, enjoy outside.
One quick one. I just want to say, a big thanks to our panelists. This was sort of, from Jules, like an agile workforce hazing almost.
I got no idea. I actually didn't expect to learn anything. I might have. Might have.
Quite honestly, these 4 individuals are taking their organizations kicking and screaming into the future. So make sure you get some time to speak with them. Yeah.